Well, hey everyone, it's been a long time since I've posted any videos, and that's just been mostly because I've been sidetracked with analyzing COVID data and well, everything that comes along with it. My wife contracted it back in July, and there's videos about the entire story there. She's still having lingering issues, and it is now the end of October 2020, going on November. I want to talk about the upcoming season changes and kind of sort of what's been going on with the data, because there's a lot that the news is not telling us. So first of all, the fact is back, and you can look this up. It is April 23rd, 2020, the Coronavirus Task Force briefing. They have a gentleman on there that discusses the half-life of the coronavirus and how it's impacted by temperature, humidity, and sunlight. So what it means is with the virus, they can't just suspend an individual virus and do tests on it because viruses are small. So they have to have like a mass of, like, say 100,000 of them, or a million, or billions and billions, however many, right? And what they do is they measure the half-life. So what the half-life is how long will it take for half of these things to die. Okay, so a good example, if you have a half-life of 1 minute, if you start with a million, then a minute later you have 500,000. Then another minute later you have 250,000. And then another minute later you have 125,000, and so on and so forth, okay? So half-life is important. Why? Because when people are walking around smelling each other's breath, breathing all over your world, that means anything that the virus sticks to, the half-life determines how long it's going to stay there at an infectious concentration before it goes away. Okay? So again, I like to think of 5 half-lives generally as a good enough reduction. We'll call it good enough. Okay? So if the half-life is 1 minute, well then 5 minutes would be sufficient. If the half-life is 2 minutes, well then 10 minutes. If the half-life is an hour, well then 5 hours, etc. Okay? So you with me on that, I hope, right? Half-life is affected by 3 things: temperature, humidity, and sunlight. So the more you have of any of those, the shorter the half-life. Okay? So if you have higher temperatures, the half-life goes down. If you have lower temperatures, the half-life goes up. If you have high humidity, the half-life goes down. And if you have low humidity, the half-life goes up. Same thing with sunlight, and specifically the UV, ultraviolet rays from the sun. When you have a lot of sunlight, the half-life goes down. When you don't have a lot of sunlight, say at nighttime in the nightlife, or just on a cloudy day, then the half-life goes up. Okay? This is because all 3 of these things are bad for the life of a respiratory droplet. Okay, right? So respiratory droplet, you can think of it a little floating water drop, right? So water likes to evaporate with heat. Duh. So the warmer it is, the faster that droplet evaporates. Okay, and the virus needs that droplet to encase it and protect it, because without the droplet, it's vulnerable and it basically falls apart, which is known as deactivating. You can't say the virus dies because technically it's not a living thing, but it's an artifact. I don't know. We can call it dying or deactivating, whatever. I'll probably just use both. Okay. So what's bad for the droplet is bad for the virus. So high temperatures make the droplet evaporate. That's bad for the virus. So higher temperatures equals shorter half-life. with humidity. The higher the humidity, the more likely that little droplet is going to combine with other water droplets and water vapor in the air. And so it's going to increase and increase and increase in size until it falls out of the air. Okay, so with the higher humidity, it falls out of the air faster and lands on the ground where we won't breathe it. However, if you walk around, it'll stick to your shoes. And so after you go around walking around town, doing all of your stuff, sanitizing your hands, being careful not to touch your face, if you don't take off your shoes, you're going to walk it right into your house and leave COVID footprints all over your floor. So there's that. And then third, sunlight, UV light deactivates the virus, blows it apart, basically. So during the day, when you've got sunlight, that's great. But as we all know, the summer sun stays in the sky longer. The summer sun goes up higher in the sky. And whenever it's higher, I'm not going to get overly technical, but as the sun goes up and points down, you've got a steeper angle of incidence, right? So when the sunlight's coming this way, it goes through a lot of atmosphere, and the atmosphere tends to filter it down and make the intensity weaker, right? So Earth is round, this is the best I can do, and then there's the atmosphere over it. And so in the mornings, when the sun is low in the sky, the light is traveling through more air to hit you. However, in summer, at high noon, it's coming straight down, and it goes through the least amount of atmosphere, which means the summer sun is the most powerful, especially at noon, right? So all of this matters because if there's clouds in the sky, you don't get as much UV radiation from the sun. If it's nighttime, you sure as hell don't. So during the day, at high noon in the summer is about the best you're going to get. But during the winter, the days are shorter, so there's less time, and the sun is lower, so there is less power. So both of those things come into play. Okay, even if it's a clear sunny day in the winter, it's not the same as a clear sunny day in the summer. It's just not. The sun's in a different place. So these things have to be considered. Where does all of this come together? When you look at Europe, Europe is encountering a new surge. And this is the thing, okay? People are incorrectly assigning some kind of political fault or political influence with the virus. It's really well beyond that. And I know what some of y'all are thinking, well, some countries have done really well, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yes, they have. In the countries that have high experience with viruses, the people know it and understand it, and they get it because they've gone through this a whole lot. However, there are other countries where they have a geographical advantage. Like if you're a small island country and you're mostly self-sufficient, you can just cut off travel and ta-da, it's not your problem, right? So there's that. There's some countries that have exercised very good control over their borders, and they're just spread out all over the place, right? So some of these extremely rural countries where there's just little tiny villages that are just very remote with difficult to impossible muddy dirt roads between each village. It's kind of difficult to spread a disease through a society like that. However, if you have a society that has really, really dense populations, high-speed trains or freeways, bustling commerce centers like shopping centers, malls, that kind of stuff, high-rise buildings, elevators, all of those things, is really beyond anything political. The virus is going to follow the laws of nature. And so this is what a lot of the first world countries are facing, because they're just structured so that the virus to really just to help the virus along. And I'll tell you how. So with it being winter, you can get a really good idea for what's about to surge if you look at a radar. I like the My Radar app. If you don't have My Radar, you should get it. When you look at Europe, all of the temperatures in Europe are dropping, right? So they're entering their coronavirus season before we do. Coronaviruses do actually have seasons, hence cold and flu season. Here in North America, in the United States, cold season, cold viruses are coronaviruses, right? Okay. They're called cold viruses because they like the cold seasons. So, cold and flu season, cold season is November through January, typically in the US. Europe this year is preceding us by a few weeks, so their temperatures dropped a little. Their temperatures dropped a little bit ahead of us. Ours dropped right in the beginning of October, right before the first presidential debate. And that's exactly how they got caught with their pants down in the Rose Garden event, because that was the first snap of cooler temperatures. And so in the past, they've been used to getting away with having these outdoor events and following the guidelines for outdoor events. Well, none of that matters on a cold, cloudy day, which it was the first cold and cloudy day in Washington, D.C. And if you look at the direction that the wind is blowing, you have everybody sitting in their chairs. So imagine that I'm in the audience, okay? There's a building that's over here, the White House. Okay, the way the wind was blowing that day was blowing over the top of the White House, which is over here, right? And everybody's sitting like this, and the president is directly ahead of me, facing me, right? So the wind goes over the top of the White House, goes over everybody's head. But the way fluid dynamics works is some of that wind is going to come down and get sucked back through the crowd, right? And then it's going to go back to the crowd, and it's going to hit up against the White House and go back up. So you have this circulation. Let me zoom out as far as I can. The air goes over the heads, and then it gets sucked back through the crowd and then up the side of the wall. And so you get this circling motion is what you get when you have leeward airflow over the top of a building. If you don't believe me, you can do some studying on engineering and some fluid dynamics, or if you have a fogger or a vape pen, and I'll get into that in a minute, just do the experiment and see how stuff moves around. You'd be surprised. So in any case, the White House super spreader event, they thought that they would be fine. Of course, whenever you look at when you look at the pictures, it's just unbelievable that this is the leaders of the free world. Somebody really dropped the ball. But they were used to getting away with it because of the weather. Okay, and that's the point that I'm making. You have to keep an eye on the weather above all else, because keep in mind, this is one reason why right now all of the Midwestern states are having enormous spikes in COVID. It doesn't have anything to do with politics. It doesn't have anything to do with people wearing masks, not wearing masks. The masks do help. Wear the stupid mask. But with the cold temperatures, the virus is going to be settling on surfaces. And if you don't take care of that, then mask or not, eventually you're going to touch it and you'll end up picking up a sandwich and eating the sandwich, and you'll eat a COVID sandwich. Okay? So there's that. So what should you do? Okay. First of all, like I said, keep an eye on the weather. When a cold front comes in, that means COVID is going to be coming along. Not that it's traveling with the cold front. COVID's already where you live. But there's a huge difference between 2 minutes and 6 hours, right? So, again, and I don't know if I gave this figure earlier, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, so room temperature, and at 80% humidity, which is really high, right? But that's what I'm going to use because that's what was in the April 23rd, 2020 White House brief. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 80 degrees humidity. At night, when there's no sunlight, so indoors where there's no sunlight, the half-life is about 6 hours, which means it takes about 24 to 30 hours for the levels of the virus, the ambient levels on surfaces and things like that, to go down to a significantly safe level. And keep in mind, we're talking half-lives, right? So it's still there and it's still around, but 5 half-lives is just my number, okay? When you introduce sunlight, summer sunlight, at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 80% humidity, with summer sunlight, the half-life drops from 6 hours to 2 minutes, right? So from 6 hours to 2 minutes. Now, if you spray a disinfectant or cleaner on top of that and you rub it, the half-life goes to even lower, right? So then you're talking about around 30 seconds. So bleach, if you just spray a surface with bleach, it takes about 5 minutes to deactivate all of the viruses. If you spray with isopropyl alcohol, it's about 30 seconds. Without anything, in the presence of sunlight, you're looking at 2 minutes. With no sunlight, you're looking at 6 hours. And as the temperatures go down, the half-life goes up. So if you're somewhere where it's 50 degrees and the humidity is like 30% and it's cloudy and it's at nighttime, it's not going anywhere. So just everybody who breathes everywhere, it just stays everywhere. It doesn't dissipate outdoors. It settles on the ground. But again, when it's colder and when the humidity is lower, it stays airborne longer. Okay? So all of these things are a factor. The summer surge we had was the coronavirus at its weakest. So most of the coronaviruses up until now are significantly less contagious. And so the summer temperatures are usually enough to where the R naught value goes down to less than 1. And so the season is over and you see this tapering off. Well, not the case. During the summer, the coronavirus managed to keep an R naught value of greater than 1, which R naught means for every case, the average number of people that case infects, right? So if you have an R naught of 2, that means for every one person who gets it, they infect 2 people. And then those 2 people go out and infect 2 people. So you start off with 1 person, then you get 2, then you get 4, then you get 8. And so it's an exponential power. COVID maintained worldwide an R naught value of about 1.3 over the summer. Some places were higher than others. Here in the US, it was higher. Some other places were lower. But yeah, it persisted through the summer, which is not good, because during the winter, and what we saw in Wuhan, the R naught value of Wuhan was 3.5. Okay, so even with a conservative, if we just take that with a 3, you start with 1, and then you get 3 people infected, and then those 3 people each get 3 people infected, so that goes from 1 to 3 to 9 to 27. Yeah, so that's it's gonna hurt if and when it hits your area. So what should you do to combat all of this? Get you some motorcycle goggles. They have some that are relatively stylish and not all that weird looking. Get you a half-face respirator, one that's like the reusable ones with P100 cartridges. At this point in the pandemic, nobody's going to side-eye you, and nobody's even going to question it or think twice. Nobody's going to go like, wow, they're overdoing it. We've all seen super maskers at this point, right? If you want to keep yourself from getting infected, that's what you need to do. Above all else, cover your eyes completely, and wear a half-face respirator, or wear a full-face one, if that's how you want to roll. That's actually really probably the best way of doing it, because then nothing touches your face at all. You know me, I'm thinking about getting it, because why the hell not? I'm almost 40. Who the hell am I trying to impress? Nobody. I could really care less about strangers. So that's what I'm doing. Y'all can do whatever it is y'all want to do. So one last thing I'll leave you with: get on YouTube, watch some videos of these guys that do vaping tricks and just people vaping. That's going to give you a real clear visual of how COVID spreads and just how sensitive the air around you is and just how easily stuff floats around. Watch a couple of dudes doing vaping tricks. And you'll see why this is so contagious. So, and always remember, if you wait until the day COVID knocks on your door to do anything, you will already be 2 weeks too late. So that's what Mike Pence is learning, right? It's just now coming into Mike Pence's world. His campaign head just got COVID or just tested positive. So you remember it was the Trump camp first, right? And they all got sick at the beginning of October. Now it's been about 2 weeks, and now his campaign directors got it. So by Thanksgiving, we'll see what happens with all those people. But yeah, do not wait until the day it knocks on your front door. Start doing these things now, because if you wait, you will be too late. So thanks again. Do please like, comment, or share, and I'll see you on the next video.